The sun shone brightly over London as Officer James Wilson stood tall and proud outside Buckingham Palace. He wore the famous red uniform of the Royal Guard, with the tall black bearskin hat. For 5 years now, James had served with honor. Everyone said he was one of the best guards they had ever seen. His job was simple but hard. Stand still. Don't move. Don't talk. Don't smile. Just guard the palace, no matter what happens around you. Tourists often tried to make him laugh or move. Children made funny faces at him. People took photos right in front of him. But James never broke the rules. Not once in 5 years. James came from a small town in northern England. His father had been a coal miner, and his grandfather too. But James wanted something different. He had always been smart in school. His teachers told him he could be anything he wanted. What James wanted most was to serve his country. At age 22, after finishing university with top marks, James surprised everyone by joining the Royal Guard instead of taking a high-paying office job. "I want to be part of something bigger than myself," he told his worried mother. Today was like any other day on duty. The summer heat made his heavy uniform uncomfortable, but James didn't show it. His face remained serious and still as stone. A group of American tourists pointed at him and took photos. A little boy waved a toy sword near his legs. James looked straight ahead, not moving a muscle. Then something unusual happened. A loud crash came from the street nearby. James heard people shouting. He wasn't supposed to look, but he could hear that something bad had happened. A car accident, maybe. His training said to ignore it. The police would handle any problems. But then he heard a woman scream, "Help! Someone please help! He's not breathing." James felt his heart beating faster. Should he break protocol? For 5 years, he had followed every rule perfectly. Breaking protocol could mean losing his job, but someone might be dying. 20 seconds passed as James fought with himself about what to do. The woman screamed again, "Please, anyone. He needs help now." James made his decision. He stepped away from his post. Moving quickly but calmly, James walked toward the commotion. People stared in shock as the Royal Guard, who never moved, rushed past them. At the palace gate, James saw what had happened. An older man lay on the ground. His face was blue. A woman kneeled beside him, crying. "I'm trained in first aid," James said, kneeling down. "Please step back and give him air." The woman moved aside, her hands shaking. James checked for a pulse. Very weak. The man wasn't breathing. James began CPR, pressing firmly on the man's chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. He kept count in his head while working. After a minute, the man gasped and coughed. Color returned to his face. James put him in the recovery position just as sirens announced the arrival of an ambulance. The paramedics took over. "You saved his life," one of them told James. Another minute, and it would have been too late. James nodded, then looked back at his empty post. Several senior guards were now watching him. Their faces showed no emotion, but James knew he was in trouble. Big trouble. As the ambulance drove away, Captain Brooks approached James. "Officer Wilson, return to headquarters immediately. The commander wants to see you." James stood at attention. "Yes, sir." People around them clapped and cheered for James. Someone shouted, "He's a hero." But James knew that in the Royal Guard, being a hero wasn't part of the job. Following orders was. That evening, James sat alone in his small apartment. On his table lay an official notice. He was to appear in court tomorrow morning. The charge: dereliction of duty, a serious offense for a Royal Guard. James sighed heavily. He had saved a man's life, but might have ended his own career. The phone rang. It was his mother. "James, I just saw the news. They're calling you the guard who broke the rules to save a life." "Yes, Mum," James said quietly. "And tomorrow, I might be the guard without a job." What James didn't know was that tomorrow would change his life forever. but not in the way he expected. The next morning came too quickly. James woke up at 5, even though his alarm was set for 6. He couldn't sleep. His stomach felt tight with worry. He made a cup of tea and sat by his window, watching the sun rise slowly over London. James put on his best suit, dark blue with a red tie. It was the suit he had worn to his father's funeral 3 years ago. He hadn't worn it since. He polished his shoes until he could see his face in them. If he was going to face trouble, he would at least look his best. At 8:30, James walked up the steps of the London Magistrate Court. The building was old and made of grey stone. It looked cold and unfriendly. Several news reporters stood outside with cameras. "Officer Wilson, why did you leave your post?" one reporter shouted. "Do you regret helping that man?" asked another. James said nothing and walked past them. Inside, the court was busy with people walking quickly in all directions. James found the right room and sat on a wooden bench outside. His hands were shaking slightly. He put them in his pockets. "Officer Wilson." James looked up. A young woman in a black suit stood before him. She had short brown hair and kind eyes. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, the court clerk. Your case is next. Judge Hammond will see you in 5 minutes." "Thank you," James said. His mouth felt dry. "Just so you know," Sarah whispered, leaning closer, "everyone here is talking about what you did. Many people think you're a hero." James nodded but didn't smile. Being called a hero wouldn't help him keep his job. The door opened. "The Queen versus Officer James Wilson," a loud voice called. James stood up and straightened his tie. He walked into the courtroom with his head held high. The room was smaller than he expected. Dark wood panels covered the walls. About 20 people sat in seats at the back. Judge Eleanor Hammond sat behind a high desk at the front. She was in her 60s with gray hair pulled back tightly. She wore black robes and small glasses. Her face looked serious and stern. People called her the Iron Judge because she never bent the rules. "Officer Wilson, you stand accused of dereliction of duty on June 15th. You left your post without permission, breaking the Royal Guard protocol that has stood for over 300 years. How do you plead?" Judge Hammond asked. "Guilty, Your Honor," James said clearly. There was no point denying what he had done. The court prosecutor, a thin man with a pointy nose, stood up. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Officer Wilson abandoned his post without authorization. The Royal Guard protocols exist for important reasons. If guards can leave whenever they feel like it, the security of the palace is at risk." The prosecutor showed pictures of James leaving his post and helping the man on the ground. While his intentions may have been good, rules are rules. "We ask for a fine of £1,000 and a formal reprimand on his record." Judge Hammond nodded and turned to James. "Do you have anything to say before I make my decision, Officer Wilson?" James took a deep breath. "Yes, Your Honor. I did leave my post. I broke protocol. But I did it to save a man's life. He wasn't breathing. If I hadn't helped, he would have died before the ambulance arrived." "The paramedics confirmed this?" Judge Hammond asked. "Yes, Your Honor. They said he had only minutes left." Judge Hammond looked at some papers on her desk. The courtroom was very quiet. James could hear the clock ticking on the wall. "Officer Wilson, I understand why you did what you did. However, the law is clear. Protocol exists for a reason. A soldier or guard cannot decide which orders to follow and which to ignore." She paused and looked directly at James. "I am fining you £500, half of what the prosecution requested, but a fine must be paid." James felt his shoulders drop. He had expected this, but it still hurt. He would pay the fine, but the mark on his record might end his career. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said quietly. Just as Judge Hammond was about to end the case, James had an idea. A memory from long ago came back to him. Something he had almost forgotten. "Your Honor," James said suddenly, raising his hand. "May I please speak again?" Judge Hammond looked surprised. People rarely asked to speak after she made her decision. She raised one eyebrow and looked at James over her glasses. "This is highly unusual, Officer Wilson. My ruling is final." "I understand, Your Honor," James said politely. "But I believe there is a law that applies to this situation that hasn't been mentioned yet." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor stood up quickly. "Your Honor, the defendant has already admitted guilt. There is no need for further discussion." Judge Hammond held up her hand for silence. She studied James with new interest. Something about his confident tone made her curious. "Very well, Officer Wilson. You may speak, but be brief." James nodded and stood up straighter. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. "Your Honor, I would like to refer to the Emergency Aid Act of 2010, Section 4, Paragraph 2. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the prosecutor looked confused. Judge Hammond's eyes widened slightly. The law states that any person, including those on official duty, has not only the right but the obligation to help someone in immediate danger of death or serious harm. This law was specifically created to protect people like police officers, soldiers, and yes, royal guards, who must sometimes make quick decisions to save lives. James took a small notebook from his pocket. He had written down the exact words of the law early that morning, just in case he found the courage to speak up. The law says, "No person shall be punished or penalized for breaking protocol if such action was taken with reasonable belief that it was necessary to prevent death or serious injury to another human being." The prosecutor was flipping frantically through a thick law book. Judge Hammond sat very still, her eyes never leaving James. "Furthermore," James continued, "there was a case 3 years ago, Phillips versus the Metropolitan Police, where a police officer left his assigned area to help a drowning child. The court ruled that saving a life takes priority over staying at an assigned post." The prosecutor found the page he was looking for. "Your Honor, he's right. The Emergency Aid Act does contain such language." Judge Hammond tapped her fingers on her desk. "Officer Wilson, where did you learn about this law?" James took a deep breath. He had never told anyone in the Royal Guard about his past. "Your Honor, before I joined the Royal Guard, I studied law at Cambridge University. I graduated with honors 6 years ago." Another wave of whispers swept through the courtroom. A reporter in the back row rushed out, probably to call his office with this new information. "A law graduate working as a Royal Guard?" Judge Hammond asked. "That's quite unusual." "Yes, Your Honor. My father wanted me to be a lawyer, but I wanted to serve my country in a different way. I chose the Royal Guard because I believe in duty and tradition. But I never forgot what I learned about the law." Judge Hammond looked at James for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. It was a small smile, but on her normally stern face, it was remarkable. "Well, Officer Wilson, it seems I've made an error. The Emergency Aid Act does indeed apply in this case." She picked up her gavel. "I hereby reverse my previous ruling. The fine is canceled. The charge of dereliction of duty is dismissed." The courtroom erupted in applause and cheers. The prosecutor looked stunned. James could hardly believe what was happening. "Order. Order in the court," Judge Hammond called, banging her gavel. When the room quieted, she looked at James again. "Officer Wilson, you have reminded this court of something important today. The law exists to protect people, not just rules. You did the right thing, both as a Royal Guard and as a citizen." James stood tall, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Your Honor." As he turned to leave, Judge Hammond said one more thing. "And Officer Wilson." James turned back. "Yes, Your Honor. I think you might have chosen the wrong career after all." James didn't know what to make of that comment. He would soon find out what she meant. James left the courtroom feeling strange. Happy, yes, but also confused. Judge Hammond's words kept playing in his mind. "I think you might have chosen the wrong career after all." Outside, The sunshine felt brighter somehow. The reporters were waiting, their cameras flashing like lightning. Officer Wilson, how does it feel to win against Judge Hammond? Is it true you're a law school graduate? Will you keep working as a Royal Guard? James held up his hands. Please, I just want to go home. I have nothing to say right now. But one reporter, a tall woman with red hair, stepped closer. Officer Wilson, the man you saved is my uncle. He wants to meet you. He's at St. Mary's Hospital. James stopped. He's okay. Yes, thanks to you. His name is Edward Brown. He had a heart attack. The doctors say without your help, he would have died. James nodded. I'll try to visit him tomorrow. As James walked away, his phone rang. It was Captain Brooks, his commander. Wilson, I just heard what happened in court. I didn't know you were a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, sir. I just studied law. Well, whatever you are, the colonel wants to see you. Right now. James's stomach tightened again. The colonel was in charge of all Royal Guards. No regular guard ever met with him. Yes, sir. I'm on my way. An hour later, James sat in the waiting room at Royal Guard headquarters. The walls were covered with pictures of guards from the past 100 years. James wondered if he would soon be a part of the past too. The colonel will see you now, said a secretary. James entered a large office with a high ceiling. Colonel William Blackwood stood by the window. He was a tall man with white hair and perfect posture. He had served in the Royal Guard for 40 years. Officer Wilson, the colonel said, not smiling. Sit down. James sat in a leather chair across from the colonel's desk. You've caused quite a stir, Colonel Blackwood said. Breaking protocol, arguing with a judge, using your secret law knowledge. I'm sorry if I've embarrassed the Royal Guard, sir, James said. The colonel sat down and looked hard at James. Are you really sorry? James thought carefully before answering. I'm sorry for any trouble I've caused, but I'm not sorry for helping that man, and I'm not sorry for defending myself in court. To James's surprise, Colonel Blackwood smiled. Good answer. I don't want guards who are sorry for doing the right thing. The colonel pushed a folder across the desk. Do you know what this is? James looked at the folder but didn't open it. No, sir. It's a proposal I wrote 5 years ago. I wanted to create a legal team within the Royal Guard. Guards who understand both military protocol and the law. The higher-ups said no. They said it wasn't necessary. James didn't know what to say. Why was the colonel telling him this? And then you come along, Colonel Blackwood continued, a Cambridge law graduate who chose to be a guard instead of a rich lawyer. And on the same day, you save a life and win a legal case. The colonel leaned forward. Wilson, I have a new job for you, if you want it. Sir, I want you to start the Royal Guard legal office. You'll be its first officer. You'll help update our protocols and train guards about their legal rights and responsibilities. James couldn't believe what he was hearing. But sir, I'm just a regular guard. Not anymore. You're exactly what we need. Someone who understands both worlds. Someone who knows that rules matter, but people matter more. James's mind was racing. A new job, using both his guard training and his law knowledge. What do you say, Wilson? The colonel asked. Before James could answer, there was a knock at the door. The secretary entered looking worried. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but there's an urgent call. It's from Buckingham Palace. The Queen's office is calling about Officer Wilson. Colonel Blackwood raised his eyebrows. The Queen's office. Now what have you done, Wilson? James shook his head. He had no idea, but he felt this strange day was about to get even stranger. Colonel Blackwood picked up the phone. This is Colonel Blackwood speaking. He listened for a moment, his eyebrows rising higher. Yes, he's right here with me. I understand. We'll be there right away. He put down the phone and looked at James with wide eyes. Officer Wilson, it seems you've caught the attention of some very important people. The Queen wishes to speak with you. Today. In 1 hour. James felt like the floor had dropped away beneath his feet. "The Queen wants to speak with me." "Why?" The message didn't say why, but when the Queen asks to see someone, they go. Colonel Blackwood stood up. "I'll drive you there myself." 30 minutes later, James sat in the back of the Colonel's car as they drove through the gates of Buckingham Palace. This time, James was going in through the front door, not standing guard outside. "Remember your training," Colonel Blackwood said as they walked through the grand hallway. "Bow when you meet Her Majesty. Address her as Your Majesty first, then ma'am after that. Speak only when spoken to." James nodded, but his mind was spinning. He had seen the Queen many times from a distance during his guard duty, but he had never spoken to her. No regular guard ever did. A palace staff member in a black suit led them to a small bright room with windows looking out on the palace gardens. The room had yellow walls and simple furniture. It looked comfortable, not fancy like James had expected. "Her Majesty will be with you shortly," the staff member said, and left them alone. James stood stiffly, his hands at his sides. Colonel Blackwood paced back and forth. "Relax, Wilson. The Queen doesn't bite." Before James could answer, the door opened. Everyone in the royal guard knew what to do when the Queen entered a room. James and Colonel Blackwood both bowed deeply. Queen Elizabeth walked in, wearing a simple blue dress. She was smaller than James had imagined, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Colonel Blackwood, Officer Wilson, please sit down." They all sat. James perched on the edge of his chair, his back straight. "Officer Wilson," the Queen said, "I've heard quite a story about you today. First, you left your post to save a man's life. Then you used your secret legal knowledge to win your case in court." "Yes, Your Majesty," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me, why did a Cambridge law graduate choose to become a royal guard?" James took a deep breath. He had to answer truthfully. "I wanted to serve my country, Your Majesty. My father was a lawyer. He worked long hours and rarely saw his family. He made good money but wasn't happy. I wanted something different, something with meaning and purpose." The Queen nodded. "And do you find meaning in standing still for hours while tourists take your picture?" James was surprised by the direct question. "Sometimes it's boring, Your Majesty. But most days, I feel proud to be part of something bigger than myself, to carry on a tradition that means so much to our country." The Queen smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that made her look younger. "Well said, Officer Wilson, but I think your talents are being wasted." She turned to Colonel Blackwood. "Colonel, I understand you've offered Officer Wilson a new position." "Yes, Your Majesty. I've asked him to start a legal office for the Royal Guard." "An excellent idea," the Queen said, "but I have a different suggestion." She looked back at James. "Officer Wilson, I would like you to serve as a legal advisor to the royal household. You would work with our existing legal team, but bring your unique perspective as someone who has served in the Guard." James couldn't believe what he was hearing. A job working for the Queen herself. "This would be in addition to Colonel Blackwood's offer," the Queen continued. "You would split your time between both roles. You would help modernize the Guard's protocols and also ensure the royal household stays up to date on legal matters affecting the monarchy." James looked at Colonel Blackwood, who nodded his approval. "It's a big responsibility, Officer Wilson," the Queen said. "What do you say?" Before James could answer, there was another knock at the door. A palace staff member entered and whispered something to the Queen. "Bring her in," the Queen said. The door opened wider, and to James's complete shock, Judge Eleanor Hammond walked in. James stood up quickly when Judge Hammond entered the room. His mind raced with questions. Why was she here? Was she still angry about the court case? Judge Hammond bowed to the Queen, then turned to James with a small smile. Gone was the stern face from the courtroom. She looked almost friendly now. "Please sit, Judge Hammond," the Queen said. "I'm glad you could join us on such short notice." "It's my honor, Your Majesty." Judge Hammond said as she sat down. The Queen turned to James. Officer Wilson, Judge Hammond and I have known each other for many years. She called me right after your court case this morning. James looked at the judge with surprise. She had called the Queen about him. You made quite an impression on her, the Queen continued. In 30 years on the bench, Judge Hammond has rarely seen someone argue the law so well without a lawyer. Judge Hammond nodded. It's true. When I heard you were a guard with a law degree, I knew you were special. Someone who understands both duty and justice is rare. James didn't know what to say. Just hours ago, this woman had tried to fine him. Now she was praising him to the Queen. Judge Hammond had an interesting idea, the Queen said, and I think it's a good one. The judge leaned forward. Officer Wilson, I want to start a program to teach basic legal rights to all royal guards and palace staff. Not to make them lawyers, but to help them understand when rules can be bent to save a life or help someone in danger. Like I did, James said. Exactly, Judge Hammond agreed. You knew the law allowed you to break protocol in an emergency, but many guards don't know this. They might let someone suffer rather than break the rules. Colonel Blackwood joined in. It's a good point. Our training focuses so much on following orders that guards sometimes forget they're human beings first, with human responsibilities. The Queen nodded. This is why I want you for both jobs, Officer Wilson. You can work with Colonel Blackwood on updating guard protocols, and with Judge Hammond on teaching legal awareness. And you can advise my legal team on matters where guard duty and the law meet. James felt overwhelmed. 3 important jobs, all because he stepped away from his post to help someone. Your Majesty, I'm honored by these offers, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such important work. The Queen smiled. You've already shown you have the knowledge. What matters more is your character. You chose to do what was right, even when it was against the rules. That's the kind of thinking we need. Judge Hammond added, and you won't be alone. You'll have experts helping you along the way. James took a deep breath. Then I accept, Your Majesty. I'll do my best in all 3 roles. Excellent, the Queen said. She stood up, and everyone quickly rose with her. Colonel Blackwood will help arrange your new schedule. You'll start next week. As they prepared to leave, a palace staff member rushed in looking worried. Your Majesty, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent situation. What is it? The Queen asked. The man Officer Wilson saved yesterday, Mr. Edward Brown. He's outside with his family. They're insisting on seeing Officer Wilson. They say they won't leave until they thank him properly. The Queen looked amused. Well, Officer Wilson, it seems your day isn't over yet. Judge Hammond laughed softly. You're becoming quite popular, Officer Wilson. Colonel Blackwood patted James on the shoulder. Better get used to it. Your life is going to be very different from now on. The Queen nodded to the staff member. Bring them to the garden. We'll all meet them there. James couldn't believe what was happening. First court, then the Colonel's office, then meeting the Queen, and now the man whose life he had saved was here with his family. As they walked toward the palace garden, James felt like he was in a dream. 24 hours ago, he had been just another guard doing his duty. Now everything had changed, and outside in the garden, a crowd was waiting for him. The palace garden was beautiful in the late afternoon sun. Flowers of all colors grew along neat paths. Birds sang in the tall trees. In the middle of the garden stood a group of people looking nervous and excited. As James walked with the Queen, Judge Hammond, and Colonel Blackwood, he saw a man in a wheelchair. Next to him stood a woman, 2 teenage boys, and a young girl. They all looked up as the group approached. The man in the wheelchair must be Edward Brown, James thought. He looked much better than when James had last seen him lying on the ground, his face blue and not breathing. When the family saw the Queen, their eyes went wide with shock. They quickly tried to bow and curtsy, even the man in the wheelchair who tried to stand up. Please, remain seated, Mr. Brown, the Queen said kindly. I understand you've had quite an ordeal. Edward Brown looked at James with tears in his eyes. Officer Wilson, I never thought I'd get to thank you. And now here you are with the Queen herself. James stepped forward and shook Edward's hand. I'm glad to see you're doing better, sir. The woman standing next to Edward wiped tears from her eyes. I'm Susan, Edward's wife. If you hadn't helped him, her voice broke. The doctors said he would have died in minutes without CPR. You saved my husband's life. The children all nodded. The young girl, about 10 years old, stepped forward shyly and handed James a card she had made. It was covered in glitter and had a picture of a guard in a red uniform. Inside it said, "Thank you for saving my grandpa." James felt a lump in his throat as he took the card. Thank you. I was just doing what anyone would do. But that's just it, Edward said, his voice stronger now. Most people wouldn't know what to do, and most guards wouldn't leave their post, even to save a life. Colonel Blackwood cleared his throat. That's something we're going to change, thanks to Officer Wilson here. The Queen nodded. Indeed. Officer Wilson will be helping us update the Royal Guard protocols and teaching guards and staff about when they can and should break the rules to help others. Edward's family looked confused, not understanding what the Queen meant. But Edward, who had been a lawyer before he retired, understood at once. You're changing the rules because of what happened to me. Not changing them, Judge Hammond explained, clarifying them, making sure everyone knows that saving a life always comes first. And Officer Wilson here, the Queen added, will be leading this effort, along with his new duties as a legal advisor to the royal household. Edward's eyes widened. A guard who gives legal advice to the Queen. That's unusual. James smiled. It's been an unusual day, sir. The teenage boys have been quiet until now, but one of them spoke up. So you're like a superhero now, a guard who saves lives and knows the law. Everyone laughed, breaking the formal mood. Even the Queen smiled widely. Not a superhero, James said, just someone who was in the right place at the right time, and who made the right choice, Edward added firmly. As they continued talking, palace staff brought out tea and small cakes. They all sat in the garden, the Queen chatting comfortably with Edward's family, as if they were old friends. James watched in amazement. 24 hours ago, he had been standing still outside the palace, just another guard in a red uniform. Now he was having tea with the Queen. Later, as the evening grew cool and Edward's family prepared to leave, the young girl ran back to James and hugged him around the legs. When I grow up, she said, I want to be just like you. James knelt down to her level. What's your name? Lily, she said. Well, Lily, I think you can be even better than me. Just remember that rules are important, but people are more important. Lily nodded seriously and ran back to her family. As they left, Colonel Blackwood stood next to James. You've made quite an impression today, Wilson. On the Browns, on Judge Hammond, even on the Queen. And tomorrow? James asked. What happens then? Colonel Blackwood smiled. Tomorrow, Officer Wilson, is when your real work begins. 3 months passed quickly. James's life had changed completely. He no longer stood guard outside the palace. Now he had an office inside it, a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a wall of law books. On his desk sat the glittery thank you card from Lily, which he kept as a reminder of why his work mattered. James divided his week between his 3 new jobs. On Mondays and Tuesdays, he worked with Colonel Blackwood, updating the Royal Guard's rules. On Wednesdays and Thursdays, he worked with Judge Hammond, teaching guards and palace staff about their legal rights. And on Fridays, he advised the Queen's legal team. Today was special. It was the day of the first training class for new Royal Guards. James stood at the front of a room filled with 20 young men and women in training uniforms. They all looked at him with curious eyes. Good morning, James began. My name is James Wilson. 3 months ago, I was just like you. A royal guard who followed orders. Then something happened that changed everything. James told them the story of Edward Brown and how saving his life had led to trouble, then to a court case, and finally to new opportunities. The young guards listened with wide eyes. "The most important thing I learned," James said, "is that being a good guard means knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. Today, we'll learn about the Emergency Aid Act and other laws that can help you make these hard choices." As James taught, he felt more confident than he ever had before. Teaching came naturally to him. The young guards asked good questions, and James answered clearly, using simple words and real examples. After class, one of the young guards stayed behind. Her name was Sophia Chen, and she had been the most attentive student. "Officer Wilson," she said, "your story is amazing, but I have a question that wasn't in the lesson." "What is it?" James asked. "Do you ever miss being a regular guard, standing at your post, being part of the tradition?" James thought about it. He did miss it sometimes, the simplicity of guard duty, the proud feeling of wearing the red uniform, even the challenge of staying still for hours. "Yes," he admitted, "sometimes I do, but I know I'm helping more people this way." Sophia nodded. "I hope I can be brave like you if I ever face a similar choice." As Sophia left, James's phone rang. It was Edward Brown. "James, how are you, my boy?" Edward had started calling James my boy, even though James was only 15 years younger than him. James didn't mind. It felt nice to have someone care about him like family. "I'm good, Edward. Just finished teaching my first class." "Wonderful. Listen, the family is having dinner this Sunday. Lily keeps asking when you'll visit again. Can you come?" James smiled. He had visited the Browns several times since that day in the garden. Their home was warm and welcoming, so different from his quiet apartment. "I'd love to. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself. Oh, and Susan wants to introduce you to her niece. She's a lawyer, too. Very smart, very pretty." James laughed. "Edward, are you trying to set me up?" "Maybe a little. You work too hard, James. You need a life outside the palace." After hanging up, James looked out his office window. He could see the spot where he used to stand guard, where another guard now stood perfectly still in the red uniform. So much had changed. There was a knock at his door. A palace staff member entered. "Officer Wilson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent situation. The Queen's legal team needs your help right away." "What's happened?" James asked, suddenly alert. "There's a problem with an international treaty. The lawyers are stuck on a point of law, and they remembered you mentioned a similar case in your university days." James stood up, straightening his uniform jacket. "I'll be right there." As he hurried down the palace hallway, James thought about how different his life was now. He was no longer just following rules. He was helping make them better. And he was exactly where he needed to be. 1 year had passed since that life-changing day when James stepped away from his post to save Edward Brown. Today, James stood in Judge Hammond's courtroom again, but this time he wasn't in trouble. He was there to watch as she announced a new law. The courtroom was packed with people. Royal guards in their red uniforms stood along the walls. Palace staff sat in the front rows. Edward Brown and his family were there too. Edward now walking with just a cane instead of using a wheelchair. In the back, reporters waited with cameras and notebooks. Judge Hammond tapped her gavel for quiet. "Today, we are here to announce the Wilson Protocol, named after Officer James Wilson." James felt his face grow warm as people turned to look at him. He still wasn't used to the attention. "The Wilson Protocol makes official what Officer Wilson taught us through his actions," Judge Hammond continued. "It states clearly that all royal guards and government workers have not only the right but the duty to break protocol when a human life is in danger." She held up a document with a red seal. "This protocol is now part of official training for all royal guards, police officers, and government staff across the United Kingdom. It has already been adopted by 5 other countries." People clapped and cheered. Edward Brown wiped tears from his eyes. His granddaughter Lily, now 11, gave James a thumbs up from her seat. After the ceremony, there was a small party in the courthouse hall. James found himself standing with Judge Hammond, both holding cups of tea. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" she asked him, "when you stepped away from your post that day?" James shook his head. "Never. I just wanted to help." Judge Hammond smiled. "Sometimes the smallest decisions have the biggest effects." She lowered her voice. "Can I tell you a secret, Officer Wilson?" "Of course. That day in court when I find you. I never expected you to accept it. I knew about your law degree." James nearly dropped his cup. "You knew. How?" "I teach part-time at Cambridge. I remembered your name from the top graduates list. When I saw you in my courtroom, I couldn't believe it. A Cambridge law star working as a royal guard. So you find me on purpose, to see if I would defend myself." Judge Hammond's eyes twinkled. "The royal guard needed someone like you. Someone who understood both worlds. I just gave you a little push." Before James could respond, Colonel Blackwood joined them. "Wilson, there you are. The Queen is asking for you." James excused himself and found the Queen talking with Edward's family. "Ah, Officer Wilson," the Queen said. "I was just telling the Browns about your promotion." James blinked in surprise. "My promotion?" The Queen smiled. "Yes, starting next month, you will be the head of the new Royal Protection Legal Department. You'll oversee the legal training of all palace security and help other countries set up similar programs." James was speechless. Edward clapped him on the shoulder. "Congratulations, my boy. Though I must say, this means you'll be even busier. When will you find time to date my niece?" Everyone laughed, including the Queen. James had met Edward's niece, Charlotte, at a family dinner. They had been seeing each other for 2 months now. "I'll make time," James said, smiling. "I've learned that some things are worth breaking routine for." Later that evening, James walked alone through St. James's Park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors. He stopped at a bench and sat down, thinking about everything that had happened in just 1 year. From a simple guard to advising the Queen, from standing alone at his post to having friends like the Browns, who treated him like family. From following rules without question to helping create better ones. All because he made one decision, to step away from his post and help a stranger. As darkness fell, James looked up at the stars appearing in the night sky. He thought about all the guards and officers who would now be trained under the Wilson Protocol. How many lives might be saved because of that? He would never know, but that was okay. Sometimes the greatest changes start with the smallest choices, and James Wilson had made the right one.